네, 점심 식사.
Did you all enjoy your lunch? It could be a bit drowsy after lunch, but we look forward to your continued active participation in the afternoon session. We will now begin session C-2, the title of which is Can Technology Development Save Humanity? Technological development has changed our daily lives in many areas, making it more convenient. Technology has freed humanity from the pain of manual labor for the most part and has enabled most people to enjoy the convenience of major facilities. However, technological development does not always come with positive aspects only. The destructive power and precision of weapons of mass destruction have increased, and the Earth is reaching doomsday due to irrevocable damage from environmental pollution. In this session, we will talk about whether technology can save humanity. The presentations will be by Professor Choi of the University of Georgia, as well as Professor Emeritus Seungjo Kim of SNU. This session will be chaired by President Miock of STEPI.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining our session C-2 on the topic of Can Technology Development Save Human Beings? I am, as introduced, President of STEPI. My name is Miock. Before we begin with the presentation of our two speakers for this session, I would like to just briefly share my views as a scientist and a science policy maker under the topic of advancement of technology and quality of life of human beings. Could you please go to the first page of the deck? As you are well aware, next page, please. Everything started with a challenge and curiosity of human beings. And there was war in the history of mankind. There was environmental degradation and pollution. But along the way, the industrialization, which brought about economic wealth to human society, was the very driver behind the fast advancement of human society. If you look back to 1800s, during this time, this red line that you see here is the poverty line. Majority of the people living on Earth were living below that poverty line. So in 1970s, in all of the continents except for Asia, most of the population started to come out of that poverty line. Then come in year 2000, many people in the Asian continent has now passed that poverty line. So development of science and technology brought about industrialization, brought about changes in industries, and brought about maximization of productivity, making a great contribution. If you look at United States, real income of the U.S. household since 1980s have not been keeping pace with the increase in productivity. Basically, that has brought about widening society gap. On the other hand, higher productivity as well as growth in household income, and the gap between the two is becoming the asset of the society as well as corporate. So it's very important to have a policy, public policy, that makes sure that there is a balance and harmony between those two aspects. Moving on to next slide. You will see that not just on the economic aspect, but there is a profound impact on our daily lives. In 1800s, people basically worked 80 hours per week. And in year 2000, for countries that brought about economic development, they are working 40 hours per week. And in Europe, many countries are actually working less than that. Basically, working hours have declined, but income has gone up. What that means is that the value of human labor is growing, and it is being highly paid for compared to the past. Last slide. So the amount of time that human beings put into labor basically is changing the way we live. If you are working most of the time, then there is less time for people to receive better education or enjoy leisurely work. But with more time, there is more cultural activities, more leisure and entertainment and culture that people could enjoy. Science and technology advancement is accelerating as we speak. We need to therefore think about the impact this will have on our life as human beings. But I would like to pose another question. How are human beings going to really drive a change that could bring about a about-face change in the behavior and the way we live? From Georgia University, we have our first speaker, Professor Choi Ikseon, to deliver his first presentation. Thank you.
The minute after I accepted the invitation of this prestigious opportunity to present here at the Global HR Forum, I regret it. I regret it not because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but because of my public speaking anxiety. Over 25 years of my professional career, I've made hundreds and hundreds of formal presentations to various audiences at various locations around the globe. Yet, I'm still nervous for my next presentation. Today, however, is different. I'm more relaxed and comfortable because I've already met you guys, my audience, yesterday in my virtual grand hall. And I've already made my presentation successfully in my physical hotel room while waiting for my COVID test result. Here and now, it is my second time to present the same slides.
Hello everyone, my name is Choi. I'm a professor of learning, design, and technology at the University of Georgia. I'm honored and delighted to be an invited speaker here at the Global HR Forum today. Thank you for your attention on my session today. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm done. This is an example to show how advanced technology can help us for our daily lives. This is one of my first virtual reality experiences that I think is meaningful to my life. My presentation today will aim to remind you of the notion that technology should serve human, not the other way around. As an educational researcher, I will share 3 stories from my educational research project to showcase how technology can be meaningfully used to address educational issues and enhance human lives. Before jumping on my stories, I will explain one critical problem I found in our education. All stories are related to address the same issue. We solve all kinds of problems every day. Some are easy and trivial. Some are difficult and serious. High stake, risky, urgent, dynamic, and so on. All problems are different. One meaningful way to classify the problem is according to the degree of uncertainty. Here I list examples of problems according to the degree of uncertainty. The first question has 0 uncertainty. It has 1 right answer. As long as you have basic understanding of mathematical assumptions, everyone can agree with the 1 right answer here. Unlike the first question, the second question has multiple possible answers, but given conditions, there are few right answers most of us can agree based on our knowledge. The next question is tricky because the right answers are depending on your situation. If you are living in Seoul, you might say the best option would be give a call to your insurance company. By doing so, you can fix this problem in less than 30 minutes. However, in my case, based on my small town, I will go to my next door neighbor to ask help, jumpstart my car, which will take only 5 to 10 minutes. to fix the problem, whereas giving a call to an insurance company will take more than an hour to fix my problem. The important point here is that if you are not familiar with my situation where the problem occurs, it is hard for you to understand why I propose a different answer. You may think I'm stupid. We may often be judgmental or criticize different ideas and solutions only from our own perspectives. Thus, solving this kind of problem begins to require not only the basic knowledge, but also the ability or attitude to consider situations and context of problems and listen to other opinions from their perspectives. I would say it is open-mindedness to understand the limitations of my knowledge and knowing and to admit that I could be wrong. Solving next question requires not only basic knowledge and open-mindedness, but also your identity. The way you approach these problems depends on who you are, what kind of philosophy you have, what kind of value system you have, and importantly, what stakes you have and what role you play in the problem. In school, students are often taught with well-defined certain problems where only basic knowledge is necessary. However, in real world, they are expected to solve uncertain problems that require a high level of open-mindedness, as well as their identity to clarify their philosophy, roles, and stakes in the problem situation. There is a gap between what we taught and what we expect them to do. No matter where you go around the globe, you will notice similar situation. It is a pervasive problem. To address this educational problem, I will propose a simple pedagogical model. First, we need to promote students to establish their authentic identity during their problem-solving activities. Secondly, we will need to include epistemic challenges to promote the development of their open-mindedness. And finally, we should include uncertainty of the situation in the curriculum. I'd like to introduce specific projects where I've applied this model to improve education while discussing how technology is used meaningfully. First story. Collaborating with my local teachers and my colleagues, and I developed a STEM integrated robotics curriculum. We explicitly ask students to play as an engineer, authentic identity. We provide authentic problem with a certain degree of uncertainty, an opportunity to challenge their knowledge through discussions and presentation in class. Here's what classroom activity looked like.
The Robo project has really transformed my students' thinking, and now they're excited about building things and looking into their STEM projects from a different angle.
They were tasked with exploring an active volcano that was emitting poisonous gases. Then we had to actually design a robot and build it.
We made the robot go from point A to point B to point C and then back to point A.
My favorite part has been programming because you get to learn how to turn and go straight and go backwards.
Programming is fun, but I think I really enjoyed more building it. It kind of helps you with coordinate grades for math, and then science like programming and picking up samples and landforms.
And that was the first time I've ever touched a screwdriver and actually worked with it.
They had to work out a lot of problems together.
It did take a lot of patience for me, even though I don't have a lot of patience.
When we test the robots, we have to see very closely what was wrong and what was right so we can improve it.
So next time when I try to build a robot, I can probably learn from those mistakes that I've had and probably shape those mistakes to help me. The most important thing is to know that you're not always going to get it right the first time, so keep trying.
It's very exciting when I'm being challenged.
It really teaches you how to think.
I can actually program now and I can understand complex stuff, so I might be able to get a good job in the future.
I've learned that I can end up being an engineer because that was never one of my thoughts.
I can see myself being an engineer in the future for my life work.
I think I could be an engineer because I will know what I'm doing and I won't be lost. Be like, oh yeah, that's how you code. Oh yeah, that's how you build it. It's not that hard.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity for building a robot because it's helped me a lot and now I can accomplish more things that I haven't accomplished.
With the positive responses from the students and teachers, as well as our validation of the learning effectiveness of this program, we finalized our lesson plan and teacher's manual to make them available to any teachers and students. We also translate them into several languages for global dissemination. We have outreached not only students and teachers in our local districts, school districts, but also students and teachers in different countries such as Haiti, Honduras, Kenya, and Greece, South Korea, and China. As we disseminate them globally, we begin to have another vision, that is, to create a globally connected classrooms. Students from different countries connected to collaborate and exchange their ideas for the projects as they share the same or similar structure of their learning activities. The ultimate goal is to promote R2, C2 minds. They should respect each other, to listen others' opinions from different countries, which will allow them to see differences between their thinking and others' thinking, which will trigger to reflect on why we are different. This will in turn allow to communicate and collaborate together, and eventually this will be the platform to promote creative minds. Creativity is not only novel ideas, but also useful ideas that are relevant to community and society. Thus, creative ideas require collaboration and communication. This globally connected classroom will particularly promote open-mindedness. To make globally connected classroom possible, I will need advanced technology, such as communication technology for both synchronous and asynchronous meetings, real-time translation technology for international collaborations, and AI and cloud computing to match different classes to keep track of their learning activities and to archive them. Now I have a good reason to use and develop technology. I'm not simply trying out new technology to see how it works in education. Instead, I have specific goals to promote student open-mindedness for global collaboration and their real-world problem-solving abilities, hoping that they will lead the world in the future. They can demonstrate better collaborative leadership among the countries as they expose to international collaborations in their early age. Here is my second story. Child pedestrian traffic safety education. Road traffic injuries are one of the top 10 leading causes of human deaths in our modern society. Nearly 1.3 million are killed on the road every year. Over 90% of road traffic deaths and injuries occur in low-income and middle-income countries. This is the reason why AI and self-driving car technology wouldn't change much on a global scale of traffic accidents. Half of them are vulnerable road users, such as pedestrians and cyclists. And children are 4 times more vulnerable to the traffic accidents than adults are on the road. To address this issue, our team has set up a research program with a clear vision, that is, to reduce the number of children being involved in traffic accidents as a pedestrian on a global scale through innovative education. Based on actual children traffic accident data, our team, collaborating with a VR company, developed a prototype of virtual reality program. This is a photo that we implemented in South Korea and also China. And here is a demo of VR program that mimics the 3 most typical situations leading to child pedestrian traffic accident. The evaluator on the left is observing the student behavior. Through it, children can experience their decision making in the simulated road situation. After a child's first virtual reality experience, a debriefing session is implemented to ask why they make certain decisions. Here's a debriefing session.
然后它突然就变成红灯了，所以我就在那里等着它变成绿灯。
我看到你在那里等着它变成绿灯了，就在这站了一会儿，对吧？对。然后你觉得它闪是什么意思？
它闪就是快要变成红灯的意思。
然后它过了一会儿，你等着它变成了绿灯。你觉得如果它闪的时候你走会发生什么？
如果它突然变成红灯，我在这中间的话也会被车撞着。
After this session, the child took the second VR experience to check if he changed his behavior. Again, the same triangle model is applied to this program. Students have the authentic identity here as a pedestrian. Their thinking process has been articulated, challenged, and corrected if needed through debriefing session. And then the uncertainty of the road traffic situation is included. This program have been very effective on improving children's road safety behavior. We try our program with a student who already had road safety education, but they demonstrated only 50% level of safe behaviors in their pre-test. After VR program, their behavior has been improved up to 80%. To increase accessibility and feasibility of this program, as it is needed for low-income, middle-income countries, we also created a group learning strategy where 5 students can learn together with one VR equipment. And we also found positive learning effectiveness. Now, I'm interested in further developing this program for a global dissemination. I will need advanced VR technology to customize traffic situation for local context. Artificial intelligence to automatize feedback to individual students' behavior. Cloud computing to centralize the data, and the big data analytic to prevent traffic accidents in a particular region. I have a good reason to use and develop technology that is saving children's lives. I did not start this project with technology, but a problem we suffer. Along the same line, collaborating with like-minded people, I've also been exploring possibility of supporting firefighters to save more human lives while keeping their lives safe. Let me go back to my virtual reality public speaking project. Over the several years, my colleague and I have been collaborating together to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in academia. Especially, we have been looking for systemic ways of recruiting students from underrepresented population or economically disadvantaged families to STEM field and of supporting them to be successful in their career. We know that communication skills such as public speaking is one of the most crucial abilities to become successful scientists, engineers, and leaders. One thing we notice is that they are often struggled with formal interviews and presentations. And it is not because of their intellectual capacity, but because of their lack of cultural awareness and experience. They did not have many opportunities to articulate and present their ideas in formal settings before. Our vision is to make this VR-based public speaking opportunity available to all levels of students despite their economic status and nationality. I have traveled many distressed areas. I've met many bright young students who deserve to be invited speakers like us at a certain point of their career, or to be even more influential members than us. Yet, their current opportunity will limit their dream. I have many good reasons to use and develop technology to offer such opportunities to them, hoping that they will advance technology to save human beings in the future. Can technology development save human beings? I will propose that we change this question to, can we save human beings by advancing technology? Then it becomes clear that it is no longer a question, but it is a choice and a commitment. It is your decision to save human beings by advancing technology. Thank you.
네, 최익선 교수님께서
Thank you, Professor Choi. Professor Choi shared with us how we could actually mitigate risk and also bring about advancement and growth, and how we could actually train and nurture the people with the needed skills of the future. Next, I would like to invite Professor Emeritus Kim Seungjo of Department of Aerospace Engineering from Seoul National University. You probably remember most recently in Korea, we had a successful launch of Nuri. I call him the grandfather of Nuri because before Nuri, we had Naro, the spaceship launch, and he was the person who was in charge of that successful launch. So this is a great opportunity for us to hear from the expert. Yes, good afternoon. I wrote my presentation in English, but since most of the audience would find Korean more easy to understand, I would just present in Korean. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to the Global HR Forum 2021. I'm very happy to be a presenter. Professor Choi was very punctual. He finished his presentation in 20 minutes. My presentation would actually require about 1 hour or so, but I am fully aware that I only have 20 minutes. However, I know that I can spend up to 15 minutes, so I may overrun the allotted time that I have. So just to give you that caution before I begin. When it comes to aerospace, aeronautics, the terminology basically is a bit overinflated. In U.S., in English, nursing is nursing, but if you look at Korean terminology, there's a lot of inflation. People used to just say aerospace, and sometimes they would want to just call it aeronautics, and sometimes they want to place more emphasis on the space rather than air. So when it comes to the disruptive innovation in the aerospace technology, if we were to define the world that we live in as the fourth industrial revolution, and I don't know whether we are really in fourth revolution because all we know is the first industrial revolution. I don't know where the second and third industrial revolution went, but is it truly a revolution? I know that we live in an age of evolution, but I don't know whether it's truly a revolution. And someone told me that the first industrial revolution, that revolution took about 100 years and 150 years. And he said only retrospectively we would know that it would take a century. And I hear that only Korea and Germany use the word fourth industrial revolution. And in Germany, they just use fourth or Industry 4.0. But having said that, if we live in fifth industrial revolution, would there be a disruptive innovation upcoming? And if there is, then aerospace technology is it. If you look at the aerospace industry over the past decade, in other industries, I think we have really brought a lot of disruptive innovations. But I think we now only have aerospace industry where there's great potential for a disruptive transformation. So it is in that regard, I would like to share with you the future image of the aerospace industry that I envision.
여기는 disruptive innovation.
So If we think about disruptive innovation or disruptive technology, whatever word you use, what you see here is what was defined by Professor Clayton M. Christensen of Harvard University. I do agree to some aspects of it, but I don't agree to others. In a nutshell, I think that it's very helpful to understand it this way. Basically, in innovation, there are two types of innovation. One is sustaining innovation. And what's surprising is sustaining innovation is evolutionary. For instance, let's say if you look at an automobile industry or automation technology, at the end of 19th century, we developed automobile technology. Even King Kojong of Korea, he also drove in a vehicle. At the time, there were carriages or there were horses. In order for there to be a disruptive innovation, the industry of carriage has to be disrupted. Then what was the disrupting force? Ford's Model T was the disruption. Model T by Ford was manufactured at such low cost that even the layperson could purchase. So all of a sudden, the industry of carriage and horses disappeared. Would that be the then case for the aerospace technology? I would think so. So we had a small talk amongst the panel members, and I talked to President Moon because under STEPI, they have an institute on aerospace policies. So in order for there to be a disruptive innovation, you need to have a market. You need to first disrupt the existing market, disrupt that existing industry. So you have to think about potential for setting up a giant market. And in the case of aerospace, there is a significant cost reduction in the launch equipment. There were so many ideas. L5, Lounge 5, 50,000, 20,000 were going to set up a establishment, a place where people could inhabit. But at that time, when that image was first envisioned, basically the price was so expensive. It was more expensive than gold. So the United States had to give up on their project of setting up a human settlement, the L5. And then afterwards, there was a dramatic launch cost reduction. The reason is very clear. It's because of rapid R&D and iteration through failure. Failure was just considered to be part of the solution. So people were able to really shorten manufacturing time, and through vertical integration, they were able to reduce the time. And parts and components. Certain chips that go in satellite 80280, for instance, the chips are extremely expensive. But now with the development, what they could do is they could just use the off-the-shelf parts. But you make sure that there is redundancy. And there's also mass production. Mass production is enabled by, once again, cost reduction, and reusability is a very important element as well. Well then, what are some of the areas that we can think of? I thought of 7 different segments and areas, and I think that these are areas that could create a huge amount or big size of a market. I think without an existence of market, there cannot be a disruption or revolution. First is UAM, urban air mobility. This has become such a big hot topic across the world. All the airplane companies and all the smaller startups. So even Hyundai Motors basically hire the head of a former NASA employee. They're trying to really put in a lot of effort behind UAM. And there's also global internet, having a satellite mega constellation. So basically at the very tip of the Seorak mountain, because you're much closer to the space, there will be better internet connection there. And then you would send a rocket, and in just 20-30 minutes, you could go anywhere you want around the globe. So there's point-to-point transport. And fourth, this is where we could really think of very big revenue stream. It's space-based solar power generation, especially in the orbits, we could think about a lot of photovoltaic generation, and that energy could be transmitted to the Earth's surface. Basically piping the solar energy and channeling that to the Earth. And if we are able to do that, then all the problem of carbon dioxide is not going to be a problem. There is no need for everyone to gather in Glasgow, no need for COP26. And then we could think about this big factories at the Earth's orbit. Basically, there could be some plants that require significant amount of energy, but there is immense amount of solar energy that could be harvested and used in the space. 2 weeks ago, Jeff Bezos, he's number 2 richest man on Earth. It's called Space Reef. I think he drew a image, Space Reef. He doesn't really make anything, but anyways, he wants to, send it off to space, but he recently shared his image. And in agencies like NASA doesn't do this business on its own. They're very much interested in commercialization and working with many different parties. NASA in the space station, because in space station there are people there, so one has to actually carry equipment and supplies, and so they had this commercial delivery services for the space station, and they engage all the private sector to do the development. And recently they want to make the Earth orbit into an industry. We call it the Earth orbit LEO, and it is called LEO commercialization or industrialization. So they want to make investment there and engage many private sector companies so that they could also make money off of it. And they're envisioning setting up a industry at low Earth orbit. So NASA is coming up with a different plan. And then there is space mining and space resource utilization. Basically, you access an asteroid, you access a certain planet, and you could mine certain resources. You could actually bring an entire asteroid, and within the Earth orbit, the precious stones and precious resources can be mined and extracted and can be brought back to Earth. And if we go to Mars, we call it ISRU, in situ resource utilization. We could do ISRU and bring resources. So that's space mining and space resources utilization. Luxembourg also has space agency, and when I visited Luxembourg, Luxembourg's national plan includes space mining and space resource utilization, and that function is under the Ministry of Economy, and I'm an advisor to that. So there are a lot of countries that have shown interest. In Europe, Luxembourg is the front runner in space mining. Then moving on to space tourism, travel and colonization. You've probably seen many articles like Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos. He already made a space visit. And SpaceX, basically, they orbited Earth 3 days and 3 nights and 4 days. I don't know how much money this could actually generate in terms of revenue stream, but I think space tourism does have potential to grow. Just like Elon Musk has said, basically, we could carry 200 people in space, SpaceX, and if they could travel to space, or if they could even travel to Mars, that could be a money-making business for Tesla, of course. So these are some of the examples. Then how big of a market potential is there? So let me just end here. If you look at UAM, urban air mobility, you would first need pilots, but with the growth of artificial intelligence, and when the rockets become more autonomous, then it will be unmanned, and we would then call that vehicle PAV, personal air vehicle. My daughter is a civil servant, and so if she were to use PAV, then all you need to do is press a button in your application, and in just a couple of minutes, you would be home in Seoul. But that's more far out in future. More closer to us is UAM, is mitigating the traffic congestion. According to some study, There are every day 300 million people who travel more than 45 minutes within the urban areas for commuting. Now, there is Brazil on this paper, on this slide, and Brazil actually has gotten, quite far advanced in terms of their aerospace industry. So you see this photo here. This is urban air mobility. This one would be piloted. It would need to have a pilot. Bottom left, you see that if it's ready for future autonomous operation, up until that point in time, these vehicles would be flown. Airbus, this is Airbus's vehicles. One on the left was developed quite some time ago. This was developed, you see that on land there is wheel, and then it could also be a vertical takeoff and landing vehicle. So these are some of the details of that. And in the US, I know that this company probably went IPO, Joby Aviation. So basically, you need to have a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft in order for this to actually be operated within an urban setting. So it's called eVTOL. It's electric-based, and vertical takeoff and landing is possible by this aircraft. So Joby Aviation is a well-known company. And Germany is also quite active in this domain. There's something called Lilium Jet. Now, this has a very small propeller, and you could actually take off and land vertically, and it has about maximum speed of 400 kilometers per hour, cruise speed of 300, and range of 300 kilometers. And this is also a German company called Velocity. Well, the company name is Volocopter. So Volocity will be for UAM, and VoloConnect has a longer range. They could travel between cities. And in order for these vehicles to operate, there are 6 major infrastructure that's needed, like for vehicle design, manufacture, maintenance, operation, air traffic, ground infra, and customer interface. NASA also has set up advanced air mobility. Basically, AAM requires many different types of infrastructure. And what Hyundai envisioned, this is their image of the future. And Hyundai had made this presentation on different global venues. So initially, around the Han River, if people want to go back and forth from the airport, they could probably make use of such UAM aircraft. And SK Telecom and Hanwha as well. Their key business direction is space, energy, and finance and aerospace. So I expect there to be significant changes on this front. So once everything becomes autonomous, basically the cost is going to go down further. That's what this slide is talking about. And then the global internet. We call this mega constellation. Stationary, basically the satellites are stationed, but at LEO, every 100 minutes, the satellite will orbit, once every single 100 minutes. So basically, there has to be continuously a constellation of satellites. So there's GEO, MEO, and LEO. GEO is about 36,000 kilometers from Earth. Starlinks of Tesla and Jeff Bezos, basically, they're all targeting for GEO. So what happens is that the spectrum or the frequency, in terms of latency, the latency is going to reduce significantly. And if you use a very strong device, the bandwidth is extremely broad, so it could cover basically a lot of subscribers. So at LEO, in terms of speed as well as coverage, everything's more beneficial. So there's Starlink and OneWeb, where currently has about 1,800, and OneWeb has about 600 satellites. So what does this enable? I have not yet included satellite-to-satellite communication, but about 100 there could be satellite-to-satellite communication. And if that is the case, it could cover everything, airplanes and ship. Internet will be provided anywhere, anytime. So we did some survey, and we asked people these questions, and they responded that even if Starlink is more expensive, they are willing to pay for that internet. then how much of money can these businesses bring? If you look at satellite communication, it is currently a market size of 300 billion. But if you go upstream, manufacturing satellite, launching satellite, that's not a big market there. Basically, 300 billion is from providing the telecommunications services. So this is Starlink satellite constellation. So under phase 1, 72 orbital planes, there will be 22 satellites, and basically covering everything with 1,500 satellites, the entire Earth surface. So basically for the polar orbit, you cannot use the same satellite. You need to have a satellite for that polar orbit. OneWeb went bankrupt, but UK government understood the importance and they supported and subsidized and invested more money to OneWeb. Amazon, I did mention before that I hear that they're going to launch a test satellite. So I think Amazon is following behind with some lag. And then if you look at rocket plane, Elon Musk of SpaceX, they developed Starship and Super Heavy. They combined the two, and then they will introduce Starship to carry people from one location to the other. If you look at London, Sydney, if you travel via Starship, it would just take you about 15 minutes. So this is how Starship is going to look like. There are different types of Starship. One that could carry a crew, another that will carry a tanker. This is a supplying tanker to other spaceships at the Earth orbit so that those spaceships could travel to Mars, etc. There's cargo, there's lunar. For lunar, they need to re-enter the Earth atmosphere. So there is re-entering related technology that is being developed for lunar spaceship. And they will probably travel orbit as well. And then the fourth aspect is the space-based solar power generation. On the left is photovoltaic on land, and on the right is in space. So if you're out in space, you're not impacted by the weather, and also there's no energy-related problems or environmental degradation. I did some number crunching. Compared to on-land solar, basically space-based is 7 times better. Some other researchers say that it's actually 10 times better. The receiving antenna, we call that rectenna, you basically send out microwave that gets converted to a DC power and AC power. So we have all the technology that we need. We just need 2 more, which is to have a low-cost launch system. So with SpaceX's cost structure, we think that this will be made possible. And then there needs to be a social consensus. They are going to, some of the people will say, because this technology uses microwave, there will be considered about the health hazard and environmental hazard, so that has to be ironed out. And then the next plan could be on the reusability. Once all the parts and components and hardwares become more reusable and cost goes down, then economically feasible LEO is going to be achievable. And so Korea also has to move very fast. This is Jeff Bezos with his image of orbital reef. And if there's no gravity out in space, we could come up with a facility that could artificially provide that gravity. And this is my idea. Between Earth and Korea, there is a L4 and L5, very stable Lagrange point. And they have less impurities there. And I think at L4, what we could do is we could actually dispose of nuclear waste. That could be a good option. We could actually dispose it there. And if we need that back, we could always go and bring it back. And then space mining. On the left is the Prime Minister of Luxembourg. Well, actually, and so we could do deep space mining as well. Some say that if you could just bring in all the asteroid resources, they say that the value is $100 trillion. But if you think about precious metal, and if you bring that in this big volume, then that no longer becomes precious. But anyhow, this is space utilization plan, and now this is space tourism. This is Richard Branson. Bert Rutan, he's the person who made this aircraft. Basically, 4 people traveled to space. Now we are soon going to see commercialization of this. There's Elon Musk with SpaceX. There's Jeff Bezos. So the richest people in the world, they are competing in aerospace. So NASA Lunar Lander program and Moon Starship of SpaceX was selected. So Jeff Bezos, what he did was that he even raised a complaint against NASA, one of the government authorities. So he was still angry that he was not selected. And so he also raised a lawsuit in the New York court, and Jeff Bezos lost that claim. And Jeff Bezos, conceded and said, I give up. What you see here is the lunar version of SpaceX. And then NASA is developing its own proprietary rocket. They've been developing this over the past decade with government budget. Because it's government budget, of course, the speed is not as quick. They will probably do a Virgin launch next year. And then there's exploration mission. We call this Artemis. Basically, you're traveling the Earth orbit under Artemis 2, then under Artemis 2, they will do orbit assessing and then build a gateway, and using that gateway to move on to Artemis 3, and then it's at that point in time that humans will land. In space settlement, the idea started to come from 1970s. There are some past images, some recent images. This is the space settlement, something that's circular, creating an artificial gravity. This is Jeff Bezos, or what Elon Musk's image of its rocket actually making a human establishment, whether it be in Mars. This is L5, space settlement in L5. This is an imagery creating gravity, providing an environment where human beings could reside. And then if we think of Mars, if we travel to Mars, how could people live there? What you could do is do terraforming. Terra means earth. So terraforming means earth shaping. There's CO2 in Mars, converting CO2 to oxygen so that human beings could breathe. So that's what terraforming is. If you look at North and South Pole, if you were to explode a nuclear weapon, then that's the fastest way to do terraforming. So if you think about market estimation from number 1 to number 7, mostly from each of these segments, we will see a market in the size of around $1 trillion. I think solar-based, solar power generation is going to be potentially the biggest market. So we see a great opening, great opportunities in the aerospace. In the past, all of this was just a dream because the cost of launching was so expensive. But what Elon Musk is doing, the Starship project, if they are to succeed next year or year after, per single launch, it's going to cost less than 10 billion because the hardware are going to be reused thousands of times. And at every single time, 100 ton can be launched into space. So we call that 100 plus. So if that's possible, Elon Musk technically have achieved this visibility, but it's the government authorities of the United States who are unable to authorize or give approval because FAA, they are experts in aircraft, but not really in space rocket. But I think that day will come soon, and especially NASA is really helping and giving a helping hand to SpaceX. NASA is really helping with these other commercial initiatives. So I think I spent a bit more time than was given to me with regards to the question. I mean, can technology save human beings? I personally believe yes. I believe some of these initiatives, for instance, Elon Musk, if we are to go to Mars, then even if there is, Elon Musk is saying that even if there is such a big crisis, we will be able to survive.
그 누리호의 할아버지답게
As befitting the moniker, the grandfather of Nuri, he has given us an eye-opener into the possibility offered by space. In the last slide of Professor Ike Choi, there was a photo of someone using a hammer to break a window in the course of a firefighter trying to save lives. And it occurred to me that the act of destruction in the end could lead to the saving of lives. And then Professor Kim talked about disruptive innovation. So it's right on cue, as if one presentation flowed naturally or segued into the other. Humanity has curiosity. It must always seek new areas and create new opportunities. So I think the two speakers have shown us a vision that sparks our curiosity. We have questions online, and while we let the offline audience think of their questions, let's entertain the online questions first. The first question is asking a question to Professor Choi. Technology ultimately must serve humans. Thank you for that message. I believe that the efficacy of education utilizing this technology is infinite. To achieve this goal, we need more administrative and financial support for schools in many countries. Isn't this a realistic limit? What is your take on this? Thank you. I'm wondering whether I should speak in Korean here. So I will do the question and answer session in Korean. That was a very good point. But why? For what? Those are the questions we must ask first. In order to overcome issues such as the requirement for many resources and a lot of money. But before all that, we must decide what problem to tackle and how, and whether that problem is legitimate. If so, then society would be willing to invest in solving that problem. The problem is, in the past, people used to focus on short-term tangible effects. They would solve problems for immediate benefit, but didn't really think about what this meant in the long term. So that made it difficult to have a social consensus or legitimacy that lends itself to the project. So in answer to your question, yes, these projects require a lot of resources. But before that, why should we tackle these problems? That's what we should think about first. In education as well, people think problems will be solved by throwing all the technology and all the resources they can at it, but that doesn't work. The key point is what to tackle and how. That's the core of the pedagogical approach. So it's not about which technology to use, but rather what methodology to offer assistance in learners in their quest for meaningful learning. So that's why we focus more on the pedagogical model. And that is free because it's the ideas in your head. They don't cost anything. However, when they are applied, you need optimum resources, input, to achieve the effect you want. Thank you. Thank you, Professor.
그런 교수님 말씀에 정적으로 좀 동감을 하는
Thank you. I fully agree to what you have mentioned. Once we agree on what it is that we need to do in terms of investment and an approach to such investment, I think can actually follow. Recently, within the New Deal government initiative, we have digital green school policy. So with regards to the use of the digital technology to fend off any risk and hazard that human beings face, there are use of such techniques and technologies for us to really train better in those regard. I would think that this next question is to Professor Kim. Your presentation on space mining was very interesting. What is Korea's policy or stance when it comes to space mining? Is Korean government active or inactive on this aspect? And also, why do we need to be progressive? I think the rationale behind that is also an important implication. If one certain country dominates the space, then that could only widen the technological gap across different countries. Would there be any way for all of the countries around the world to equitably enjoy the benefits of such technology? So in that sense, what do you think is a Korea government or Korea's position? The first question relating to the Korean government's position, I think President Moon would be better placed to respond to that question. I am not in a position to speak on behalf of the government, but it's my take that Korean government is trying to be quite active in this front. But one thing that I keep emphasizing these days is that technology development, unless you really have a stretched goal, basically the outcome is not going to be on par with that objective. So in space technology as well, globally, there are disruptive innovations that's taking place. So we need to aim high, and we really have to work towards that objective. And in that process, we could fail. We should be allowed to fail. And those people who fail should not be penalized in the process. This is my personal view. I don't know about the government policy, but I know the Korean government is making active investments. So as long as we have good direction, good guidepost, I think we will be okay. In terms of the inequalities in terms of aerospace technology, now there's no country who's going to play that mediating role. Everyone is on their own. If there is massive amount of industrialization, I would think that at the end of the day, we will all go towards that balancing, road. NASA has been a bit slow, but U.S., the private sector, really led the advancement. And some of these private companies, they have proprietary technology. And in aerospace, the foundation of all the enabling activities come from a significant decline in launching cost. But it doesn't stop there. But satellites, we can easily make satellite at reasonable cost. Starlink satellite of Elon Musk, basically their plan is to send 12,000 satellites up to orbit. Also, similar to what we are doing, basically, if the cost is as high as what we are experiencing, it's impossible. Every single satellite, they're going to make 260 satellites and really, launch it and send it to orbit through a very innovative approach. So it's not just the launcher, but even all the other hardware, like the satellites, basically can be made at low cost. So we need to get rid of the prejudice. Then what's going to happen for us as we go forward? Globally, there are about 100 companies, I think maybe more than 100, who's been set up to develop these launchers. But basically, when Wright brothers developed and invented airplane, after that there were thousands of airplane companies that were set up. But eventually they all went bankrupt, and only a handful, like Lockheed Martin and Boeing, they survived. Same for the launching vehicle as well. China has about 20-30 technologies and 20-30 companies developing, as well as the government, U.S. as well. They're making or using 3D printers, and with small number of people, they could very easily and cheaply develop launching vehicles. So at the impact of industrialization, I believe that this technology will start to spread across the globe. Of course, it will be very difficult for countries without financial means to develop into aerospace industry. Then, under this situation, what should Korea do? Korea, we are a small country, so basically, we need to diversify. So we can't just bet on one single industry. And Korean people are very diligent. So when they think that there is certain industry that's really emerging, then they all participate, like Hanwha and the naval, the navy, and the military. Everyone wants to do it. Like 5 years ago, drone. I understand that there's a lot of drone industry or big drone industry that was developed in Korea as well. So anyhow, for aerospace, I think because we are small in terms of our size, I think that we need to make sure that we have a very clear goal. For instance, we want to have 10% of the global aerospace market. In order to do that, we need to have an aerospace agency in place. We need to set up an aerospace agency, and that agency has to be run with an entrepreneurial mind, just like Elon Musk. It shouldn't be like, oh, we will invest some tax money and we'll try and we could fail. That's okay. That's not the right mindset. We need to have a space agency. They need to have a business mind, entrepreneurship, and really try at different failure and involve private companies like Hanwha, the industries, as well as policymakers. All of them should put their mind together. And basically, people working in the space agency should not just be a civil servant. We need to make sure that their legacies stay behind, and we need to continuously follow up. And there needs to be a succession of technical expertise from one generation to the other. And with regard to the question, if we were to apply that question to Korea, I think we need space agency as quickly as possible. Luxembourg has space agency. UAE also has space agency. And UAE even sent a lunar orbital spaceship. So there are a lot of countries around the world who's set up a space agency. So we need that in Korea as well. Just like NASA and JAXA of Japan and Europe's ESA, they've gone through significant amount of trial and error, and we do not need to follow suit. We do not need to repeat the same trial and error that these other agencies went through in the 60s and 70s. Thank you.
답변 감사합니다.
Thank you, Professor Kim. I believe that the history of Korea's aerospace development can be categorized into pre-Nuri and post-Nuri. Before we built Nuri, it was the process of building the technological competence, and with the base of technology that we've built up, we have the power to rise to the many challenges outlined by Professor Kim. And this is not just for Korea, but this opportunity should be made available to all of humanity, if you agree, that is. And we have, I'm sure, members of the audience who wish to ask questions. Please raise your hand so that we can give you the microphone. Do we have any questions from the floor? There's one hand up here. Can you deliver the microphone to that person? Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Taesung Lee. Thank you for your presentation. Regarding the question of whether technology can save humanity, I wonder whether technology can always bring about positive results only. The one that comes to mind is similar to what was mentioned earlier. Technology development costs money, and you need digital literacy and the relevant skill set. and then there will be inequality among users. And the good education programs that Professor Choi mentioned will be made available to some but not to others. You can envision these situations. How do we respond to those circumstances? I wonder what our two speakers think. Professor Choi, would you like to take the question? That is a difficult question. Having said that, we must seriously address social inequality, and have we really been sincerely making a full-fledged effort to address such inequality? I'm afraid the answer is no. So, regardless of what we do, I believe it's important to have the right objective. And it needs training to know how to establish that, but we haven't had the chance to learn that seriously since we were young. All we were focused on was accumulating knowledge. So when we become members of society, discussion in these areas are not really taking place earnestly. So, in resolving issues of social inequality, we don't have a large pool of success cases built up. For instance, in the past, in schools, in childhood education 30 years ago, there was the introduction of personal computers. Schools spent money to buy computers for students, but if you look at the software, 95% of the software was games, not exactly educational content. But when you provide the technology in those circumstances, children will play games. They will not do constructive things with the personal computer. And that's one example of not having enough examples to know better. I think the inequality issue requires the same approach. It is a challenging issue to tackle, but we don't have best cases because since we were young, we haven't had much chance to receive the training to think seriously about resolving social inequality. And as a result, the society has not exactly created an abundant pool of best cases. In society, there's good, there's also evil. What we can do is make a lot of great best cases and expose them and make them available. I think that's the good approach. So, inequality comes with technology development, but society as a whole must seriously, in earnest, make the requisite effort at all levels to resolve this problem. Thank you.
김승조 교수님.
질문하신 분이 사실 오늘 제가 말씀드린
Yes, I think the person who asked the question really pointed out the weakness, the weak link in what I have presented. Basically, what I'm talking about is making something new, like space tourism. Only the most rich can go. So there is criticism on that. But initially, there's development and there needs to be commercialization. So the price has to be very high. But once this becomes more prevalent, it's just like people riding a horse, then riding an automobile with the launch of Model T. So that time will eventually come. But it will be difficult at the very beginning. And then another interesting point is global internet. Basically, with global internet, what people are seeking to do is to provide internet access to those who were unable to enjoy that benefit and really changing the life of the vulnerable, like people in Africa or in Asia. But you need to recoup that investment. You need to recoup investment you've made in making satellite and launching the satellite. Right now, the telecommunication services is $99 or $100. But if you think about it, there are people who have better means, people who live in the urban areas but who are more rich, only the affluent. Would they not be the only ones that would benefit from this technological advancement? What happens to those more vulnerable population living in the remote areas in Africa? That is a very valid point. But with the advancement of technology, I think if you think about global internet, that is beneficial to all. In the US, they have the Spectrum Commission. Basically, they sell frequency, they sell spectrum, and then they make money. And they say, I understand that the commission provided subsidy to Elon Musk's company to support them so that they could actually bring this commercial service so that there could be internet access provided to those remote areas. But this is just for US. So I think, in my view, for Africa, since Elon Musk has a lot of money, maybe they could come up with a program to provide such services at very low price to those people in need. And in US, there is a strong call for Elon Musk to donate, the wealth that he has so that they could help out with people in need. So maybe, there could be different ways for us to approach this inequality, the social gap issue. But still, we have a long way to go.
답변하는 사이에
We have a new question. Rather than aerospace development, isn't it more urgent to respond to the climate change? Can we respond to climate change with the current technology? Should we not focus on aerospace development after dealing with climate change, Professor? That's being frequently discussed among people. For instance, is space development keeping us from responding to climate change? Not necessarily. Fortunately, this is no longer the era in which governments are pouring in taxpayers' money into aerospace development because the private sector has grown through industrialization and commercialization. Private sector is investing in aerospace now, so it's not necessarily one thing over the other. The two have to go together. For instance, if we're to use solar energy from space, we could resolve a lot of the problems stemming from fossil fuel use. We talked about societal consensus. Because of the microwave issue, we do need to achieve societal consensus. But if we have that consensus, I understand that the global power facilities are about 6 terawatts and 40 to 50% of them are in operation. But if we could resolve about 2 terawatts or source 2 terawatts per year, I think that should be sufficient to address half the world's annual electricity demand. Then we could do away with fossil fuel altogether, basically. So that could be one answer. Thank you.
어떤 분야가
I guess in determining whether a certain domain competes with other or is complementary to one another, we need to take a broader perspective. For instance, if you look at satellite technology, we have a very advanced level that's commensurate to developed markets. So satellites that could actually monitor climate change and changes in the weather pattern is currently being operated by Korea as well. So for the purpose of monitoring climate change, there are also other technologies like AI technology that needs to be used in combination with the satellite technology. So I think it would be quite important for us to broaden our perspective. We have another question. This is a question in English. Since aerospace is such a hot topic, and I'm not quite sure about the intent of this question.
Is that sustainable? 이렇게 질문이 왔습니다.
Well, it seems like, I don't know, it is related to the space technology. But anyway, I think Autobahn unlimited speed is just a problem for one country, I think. In Korea, in case of Korea, we are reducing the automobile speed gradually. So I don't know, it's related. But anyway, that I don't know, Autobahn speed, for example, 300 kilometers per hour. I don't think that many people have that high speed when they're driving. So in total sense, I don't know. It's big trouble or not, I don't know.
예. 그다음 질문은 이게
And the next question is, in order to be irrelevant to the climate change crisis, maybe we should use liquid hydrogen instead of kerosene as fuel for rockets. And it seems that Korea recently developed a rocket using kerosene. Will it take a long time to develop the liquid nitrogen fuel? Oh, that's one of my favorite topics, so I'm afraid I will have to overrun the time limit. But personally, I strongly believe we should not use liquid nitrogen, or excuse me, liquid hydrogen. Korea is putting a strong drive behind hydrogen usage, but this will require a lot of money and a lot of energy to produce. Otherwise, you could use fossil fuel to arrive at the same or address the same energy demand. But if you look at companies like Lockheed Martin and Boeing, they've formed the United Launch Alliance, ULA, and then there's Delta. One of them, I think, uses liquid hydrogen. And Delta is too expensive a model to sustain because they use the expensive liquid hydrogen. And why is it so expensive? Why is the rocket so expensive? Because they use liquid hydrogen. Liquid hydrogen is very expensive, but compared to the input, there's not much output. So in order to make up for that output, you have to tie all these rockets next to it, which basically means this one rocket costs the price of two. And then the rockets will produce harmful exhaust gas. So on a long-term basis, liquid hydrogen is not a viable option, and the fuel tank has to be ginormous. If I was too strong in my objection, I apologize. So to some extent, we are seeing solutions. Of course, it produces CO2 gases, but the new rockets all have methane engine that use methane. So they produce less harmful exhaust gas than, let's say, fossil fuels. But the response to that has to be prepared as well. So on the face of it, liquid hydrogen sounds nice, but in reality, there's a limit, technological and other limits. So once again, let me emphasize the quantity of hydrogen gas that will be required is humongous, and there's only so much you can do with this. So I foresee using methane gas as we are doing currently, and maybe have some offset by energy drawn from solar energy from space. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. At the current technology level, there is an issue in relation to cost. So in bringing development to use for space application, that this is problematic. But I think the person asking the question is saying that climate change is going to require us to spend to fend off this crisis. So in that perspective, I think maybe the solution may be one of the options that's open to consideration. So we have about 5 more minutes left. So I think this will be the last question that we could take. And this question also relates to the question relating to this session. So which technology do you think can really save human race? To both of our speakers, I would like to pose this question as the last question, as it is closely related to the topic of the session. What do you think is the technology, which technology do you think could really help to save human race? Professor Choi? Rather than offering a direct answer to that question, I would like to ask Professor Kim to provide that answer. But under the theme of technology development and saving of human beings, I think we need to change from implicit agency to explicit agency. There are many cases when we are faced with a problem, we don't know who the person or which one will be the solution. The theme of this session as well, which technology is going to save human being. So implicit agency, I think that represents implicit agency. And that's because that's how we were trained and educated, and that's how we've behaved all along. And basically, we are culturally not very accustomed to expressing oneself explicitly. But when we want to tackle a problem, having an ownership, having responsibility in solving that problem with a very clear set goal is extremely important. Same for science advancement. Science development is driven by all of us, and in that process, there is a context. There is also an objective and purpose under which we operate. Setting a good objective is something that requires abilities. Setting meaningful objective, meaningful goal, just like Elon Musk, founder of Apple, one of the things that they're really good at is not just developing technologies, but also defining a positive goal and positive vision. And that brings about a lot of added value in many aspects, in society, in economy, and it actually drives social consensus, and it brings about a social transformation. So defining a virtuous goal and a vision is something that requires practice. So we need to transform from implicit towards explicit agency. I believe that that is important for the growth and advancement of technology and of the human race. Professor Kim, which technology do you think is going to save human beings? Isn't it very clear? I think my answer is predictable. Well, in terms of technology, I have a very clear answer. But in terms of human race, I'm not very clear on that aspect. But I've mentioned 7 different disruptive technological domains. Out of those 7, I believe that an aspect that could really help the problems that humans face is the solar-based or the space-based photovoltaic energy generation. From the start of human civilization, we've been fighting for the energy problem, and we could maybe think of an energy utopia. So all the dependence on fossil fuel could be eliminated, and climate change issue could go away. Of course, there are many reasons behind climate change. I mean, even if we solve the problem of the fossil fuel, climate change may happen because there are many factors that come into play. But anyhow, I believe that space-based solar power generation could be of great help to the survivability of human race.
Thank you, Professor. Our time's up. I believe the biggest role of the moderator is to be a strict timekeeper. So I am happy to report that we were able to wrap up on time, 10 to 4, in which we listened to the presentations and entertained questions from the audience. In closing, I'd like to thank you all for your contribution. And regarding the question or the theme of our session, I would like to say it is human beings that will save human beings. It is human beings who develop science and technology, and it is also human beings who set the direction of how technology will be used to save itself. I would like to thank the organizers for presenting us with this pregnant topic. And I'd also like to thank our two speakers for sharing their insight. I would also like to thank our participants both online and offline. I look forward to your active contribution in the subsequent sessions. Thank you, everyone. This marks the end of our session. Thank you.
네. Thank you very much. Can technology development save human beings? That was a very provocative topic, and thank you very much for such passionate discussion to all of our participants. This brings us to the end of the C-2 session. We will take a 10-minute coffee break. We will resume at 4 p.m. Thank you.